So firstly, if I could just go around and have you introduce yourselves, you're real trailblazers in your own right. And Daniela, you came up first. So if you could kindly just introduce yourself in any way you choose.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm such a huge fan of you and the other women on the panel today. My name is Danielle Kayembe. I am a female futurist and a serial entrepreneur. I'm also a speaker and the author of The Silent Rise of the Female-Driven Economy, which is a white paper on women and the future of business and markets and economics. And I'm very excited to be here and speaking about how we can use data and information to create a better world for all women and especially mothers.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And Mihaela, if I could have you introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Mandeep. Yeah, I'm Mihaela William. I call myself a technology alchemist. My passion is to make the world better through the exponential power of technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihaela. I know I should be calling you Dr. Mihaela, and many things in your career, so we will get into that a little further. But thank you for your very succinct introduction. And Artika, you are on mute, but I know you'll unmute yourself. And if you could kindly introduce yourself also.
Hello, my name is Artika Tyner. I am a law professor, a writer, and a researcher. So I focus primarily on civil rights and human rights law. And the aspect that connects to women driving change is dealing with some of the racial disparities and gender disparities in education and criminal justice. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you, and we're very honored to have you. And I'm Dr. Mandeep Rai. I'll be your moderator today. I have a background in broadcast journalism, in banking and business, and in international development. And most recently, really over the last decade, I couldn't call it that recent, but the book has just come out recently. I've really established a expertise in values, and I've created a book called The Values Compass. So thinking about values first and foremost, because I know all of your change has been driven by values. I'm just going to ask a fun question and then a radical question. The fun question, we'll start with Mihaela first, since she's writing, and I can catch her off guard. Mihaela, I know you were a Romanian, I feel like saying Miss Romania maybe, and perhaps you even have been in the Olympics. Maybe you could tell us a fun fact. I've already told a few, but I think you have many. So maybe share a fun fact about you. And then we could talk about the value that you think came out of that fun fact and the value that's been driving your career.
Thank you so much. There are a few of them you already mentioned, two of them. So yes, I was a mathematics Olympics and also won the Olympiad of Poetry back in my country. But I think a fun fact, more or less fun, but a fact, something which people do not really know about me, is that once I left Romania, I spent maybe half of my time at embassies getting visas in order to participate internationally in the things where I could contribute. So this also obviously has opened a lot of windows to my drive, I can say. The drive to inclusivity, the drive to enabling everyone to fulfill their talent and to contribute to the world by opening doors versus putting barriers. So this is definitely a drive for me. And as a professor as well, I'm supporting students to do that. And also in every business engagement, I'm enabling creativity to come to the fore. Thank you.
I can really relate to that because I think before the pandemic, perhaps we didn't need as many visas, but during the pandemic, and now if we could say we're in the post-pandemic era, I'm not sure, but I can tell you many more visas are needed. I spent the last month in Africa, and Africa's first line that they say is, well, we need a visa to come to your country, so you're going to need a visa to come to ours. And then actually all kinds of countries, Kazakhstan, or even countries that didn't necessarily think that they had to close their borders. Of course, everyone has closed their borders. So I can imagine you on a visa line, and I can imagine the drive that came through. And indeed, I think creativity really is motivating you throughout. So sharing that. Daniela, because you just put yourself on mute, I'm going to ask you a fun fact, anything you want, and then we can talk about what value you feel is driving your career.
My gosh, a fun fact about myself. Well, I don't know if I have anything as impressive as Mihaela's. Oh my goodness. I don't know.
Could be anything, something from your childhood, something you share with your friends, something only your best friend knows, something your best friend doesn't even know. It doesn't have to be impressive. It doesn't have to be, it can just be a song you like, anything.
Well, I'll say kind of the other part of my life is that I actually spent many years meditating and learning under a group of monks in the New York area. And so that's, I think, a very big part of my life. And even though I'm not, I think I spent about 9.5 years where that was kind of the center piece of my life. But I think it's something that's continued to influence my life and influence how I approach. I think it's shaped a lot of my thinking and a lot of my values.
And so which value do you think is now shaping or driving your career? And I know it's a portfolio career. I know you do many things and there are many different projects, but maybe there's something that, whether it be justice, I'm now guessing because of what I've read about your career and what I know about your career, what do you think is driving you?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think that probably some like evolved form of like kindness. And I think starting with kindness for myself, and then in that space of kindness for myself, also wanting the same for others, right? Wanting to create societies that are more reflective of that, and helping to generate narratives and ideas that create more space for people to understand how to communicate with each other. And, I think at the root of so many of the problems is it's a lack of understanding, right? It's fundamentally a lack of kindness for others. So I think that's probably how I'd state it.
I am really glad you stated it in that way. One, because kindness, compassion, empathy is so important. But more importantly, I believe, especially within a conversation like this, which is focused around women, kindness to ourselves. We're so willing to not put the face mask on an aeroplane, right? We're so willing to put it on our children first, or put it on someone else who needs help first. Oh, it's wonderful. Maya has just joined us, so I'll just be expanding the panel a little further. But I'm really glad you mentioned. Thank you. Maya, thank you so much for joining. I know you were with us on the green room, and then something happened. So we're really glad that you're and all you've spoken about. There's a tiny echo maybe in the audio. So maybe if you put yourself on mute, or maybe you're hearing this in two different places, Maya. Is it me? Yeah, so maybe just put yourself on mute for the moment. And then you might find that maybe you have yourself on, maybe we're on the desktop and on a laptop, or maybe we're on your phone and on I feel like there's two devices, or somehow there's some feedback or echo. So I'll just give you a moment. Okay, great. Artika, may I come over to you? And the fun fact could potentially be that book behind you, which I'm dying to ask you about, and the superwoman. And we'd love to get a little backstory there. and a fun fact if you wish, and also then which value you feel is driving your change.
I think that's a perfect piece. The book behind me is called Justice Makes a Difference, the story of Miss Freedom Fighter Esquire. I wrote the book as an opportunity to inspire young women to dare to dream to be their best selves. So it's about a young 8-year-old girl that goes on an adventure with her grandmother to learn about the heroes and sheroes, those everyday folks who decided to make a difference in their community. Whether it's Dr. Wangari Maathai, who started with planting just one tree in Kenya that led to millions of trees being planted around the world, or Shirley Chisholm in our local and national scene of being one of the first women before there was Hillary Clinton daring to run for office in 1972. Shirley Chisholm said she was unbought and unbossed. And so she really led the movement around women being on the national party ticket in the United States. So that book was written by me and nearly a dozen other children's books as an opportunity. So the fun fact would be I'm a children's book author, but more importantly, that I wanted to become Miss Freedom Fighter Esquire, basically Wonder Woman with a law degree and an afro, that I really wanted to be able to be impactful in my community and make a difference. So I would say my values are around a particular notion of a few things. The first one related to faith, next one related to culture, and then last but not least, and I'll borrow that piece on building upon kindness, a bit of humility, that willingness to learn, the willingness to discover, and the willingness to engage. So for faith, for me, it aligns directly with culture. I'm from a lineage of pastors and folks who fundraised and built many of the churches in our Baptist and Pentecostal faiths with their bare hands. So I knew the importance of ensuring that my faith would guide me, and that my faith meant that I was meant not to lead, but truly meant to serve in my community, whether as someone who was homeless or visiting in the prisons. That's how I started my work in criminal justice. Started when I was a young girl, just like Justice in the book, making a determination that you're never too young to make a difference.
What an incredible story you just gave. I can only imagine how brilliant your books are. I love the fact that, so I've met Wangari Maathai before she passed away and interviewed her. And you just rattled through so many of my role models, sharing their story so succinctly. And yet each one of them, I could give you the platform for each one of them, and then yourself. And I can see your lineage of pastors and making change, etc. So thank you so much. And you're right, that type of impact, it's not easy to boil it down to one value, but you see that you're driven. I mean, kindness, of course, humility, of course, but would you say there's one? Would you say, if I were to ask you really to bring it down to one, what would you say? The top one. Of course, there's all the others that are giving the balance, but
I think oftentimes we hear that it's about our ancestors, that we should be busy making our ancestors proud, and this idea that we're our ancestors' wildest dreams. So I would say my value is lineage, because oftentimes people try to rewrite our stories and say that we were just slaves. No, we were enslaved Africans, and I have a long cultural history. It takes me back to Ghana and the Kwamu Kingdom and culture. And when I put all those together of language, space, beliefs, and just really that strength, because the Akwamu Kingdom, the main piece that we're always reminded is that we're the conquerors of all conquerors, that the Akwamus, wherever they were placed in the world, they actively resisted slavery. So when I think about more of those pieces, for me, it's really related to lineage, ancestral power, spirit, and determination.
I have to applaud that. I really so moved by that lineage with all that comes with it. And you're absolutely right that it's power. And we'll do a little deeper dive into Ghana afterwards. So I'm just going to give a quick update that we would have had Mujan with us too, but she has hurt herself. It was an accident. She's fine. She has a few bruises and she just can't make it. And I'm very, one, send her all of our good wishes. And two, there will be many more of these panels, and we'll definitely have her with us. We're not going to leave anyone behind. Maya, we are so glad that you're here. Sorry to have lost you for a few moments between the green room and the session. However, all we had done had asked everyone to introduce themselves however they wish to introduce themselves. And then we went into the fun fact. So if you could kindly introduce yourself in any way, which way you wish. And then we were going to ask a fun fact. And then we spoke about one value that you believe is driving your career. But let's just start with the introduction. That'll be the easiest.
Voilà. Well, my name is Maya Marburger. I still use the echo here. Is that better this way, probably?
No,
It's okay or not? You know, eh?
Put the headphones back in. Perfect.
So, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think
Better?
still an echo.
It's better now? No. I think I let you guys further and I go out.
Okay, we'll try, if we just try disconnecting, reconnecting, maybe that could help. Otherwise, if we go into sessions and within sessions there's tech support, they could potentially help. But I'm pretty sure that if you're not on any other device and you're only on the one device, you'll be able to reconnect. So let's try that for a moment. In the meantime, I'll quickly just say a few words about Maya. She's speaking to us from Switzerland. She's a fine jewelry maker. And yet during the pandemic, she's also started a whole nother industry and a whole nother branch to her activity, which actually has nothing to do with fine jewelry at all. So she's got this real sense of resilience and adaptability and flexibility, which I'd love to go into as soon as she's back with us. So we'll have her with us without an echo, hopefully very soon. Maya, do you want to give it another go, or do you want to?
I try. By me, it's fine.
Much better. Brilliant. You have fixed it. Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Yes, the introduction is already good, what you did for me. I can still hear the echo. And you?
No echo. I can't. Can anyone else hear us? We're good? We're good.
Okay, good. Sorry. And yes, I started my own company in the jewelry business. And during the lockdown, it was very difficult because it was a lockdown. We couldn't do anything. So I got the opportunity to start a new career or a career by side, completely different. With my little jewelry, I work with so little things. And now I'm working with big plans. So I'm working with the ambassadors and the state governors and ministers. And I just do that for 2 days. And I think this is something women have in common, that we are flexible and we take the chance at the spot to react differently, especially as a mother. We have to. All situations are different. And if somebody can find it, it's the mother, isn't it? In all kind of situations. So I want also to encourage all the women, if they are mothers or have a mother, of course, as we all have, just to believe on that we will always find a solution. Just keep open and believe in yourself, isn't it? So
I think that's a great segue to my next question, which is exactly, as you rightly say, either we're mothers or we all definitely have a mother. And, as we know, we've just had Mother's Day. Now, firstly, I really had to investigate, why is Mother's Day just now for the whole entire planet, apart from the UK? I'm speaking to you from London. And it's always in March in the UK because it's connected to the church and it's the second Sunday after Easter. And so Mother's Day has always been there and then. But I had thought that the Commonwealth countries would clearly follow the English route, but no, they follow the American route. And the American route began because there was a particular president who wanted a Mother's Day. I read this history a few days ago and I'm trying to remember his name. And then there was a lady who lost her mother in May. And she also thought that Mother's Day was a great way to mark or celebrate. Now, I know since then she became quite disappointed with how commercial this day became. And, we often joke that it's become a hallmark celebration. However, all of us have celebrated it in some way, shape or form. And I wish it wasn't just a day in May or March. I wish it were a day that we would celebrate every single day, because the sacrifices our mothers make, the effort they put in, the heart that they have, frankly, you never experience that in any other being. I don't think. I would say mothers are the closest we have to divinity. So saying that, I'm going to go over to Michaela, keeping the same kind of rhythm, and ask her, one, maybe what she would say was the most profound way that Mother's Day either was celebrated, or that we could celebrate our mothers, or be celebrated each and every day.
I think if it is in general, I would say by nurturing. I think this is mainly the quality of a mother. And we can do that in many ways. Let's say at a global level. Just the awareness that actually what we are doing with nature and with each other is war, is conquering. It's just the opposite of nurturing. So I think motherhood has foremost this quality to it. And because of this panel's title, Women Changing the World, of course we want to change it for the better for our kids in the first place. So we have this nurturing quality already in us as mothers. Now to the particular, how to celebrate it, obviously, yes, I think there are many instances, which I'm sure each and every one of the panelists has. But also I would like to say that I'm very happy that I believe I instilled this also in my children. So I'm speaking from Hawaii, where my youngest son brought me as a surprise trip for Mother's Day. So I just want to say I truly am celebrating it for 1 week, just together with this conference, or what I can say, gathering of ladies. And I'm very happy. I feel fulfilled in this regard. Thank you.
What a treat. What a son. I'm going to share that story with my sons. I think it's a wonderful way to celebrate, and long may that continue. And may he do something equally special every year. So that's a really great share. Thank you very much. And I also agree with the nurturing, that thank you for expanding the questions. I think I'd like to do that with Daniela, maybe to expand the question as to what we appreciate, or how you see the quality of motherhood. And I know you've done a lot of work in this space also professionally. And then what you would say was the best way of celebrating that you've seen or witnessed.
Sure. So, one of the interesting things that we found in some recent research that I did was that out of all of the toughest endurance sports in the world, so whether you think of someone climbing Everest, or someone, riding in the Tour de France, or competing in an Ironman, there's actually nothing that's harder on the human body than a typical pregnancy. And right. And no, if you think of all of those events I just mentioned, you experience them. I mean, you run a marathon in a day and then you're done. Right. And then, Ironman is 1 day, maybe 3. Tour de France might last close to a month. But only mothers stay at that elevated state for close to 280 days. And so mothers are actually the world's toughest endurance athletes. And I think it's a really powerful thing. So often the experience of becoming a mother, it's downplayed, or it's talked. I think women share their symptoms, and, they're kind of told that it's not that serious, or they're told that it's supposed to be this beautiful kind of etheric time, when in reality, you are working your body, right? You are working harder than any other athlete on the planet. And so I think it's really important to reset these narratives and to reset them in a way that places, I think, the appropriate level of acknowledgement and respect on what exactly women truly go through to create life, you know? And so I think that, for me, as much as possible, it's important to um, give women the full measure of the acknowledgement of what they do as they become mothers, and then, have additional children and then raise those children, right? Because I think there's the literal marathon of birth, and then there's that continuing marathon as you raise your children, and until they can take you to Hawaii, you're chasing after them, right? Like you're still kind of this, it's still kind of this competition that you're in to, for 10, 20 years as they grow. So, I think for me that was one of the most interesting and mind-opening things that I learned through the work and research that we were doing. And I think it really reset how I thought about motherhood and the reverence, that it really deserves.
I mean, I applauded that all the way through, because just to reframe it in that way, I know Artika's mind will be exploding with ideas just like mine is, because it's changing the narrative. And you're absolutely right that firstly, comparing the number of days, which was so well said, but once you've given birth, the fact that you then have to do it so much with so little sleep. If there was a time I was tested, it would have been that whole first year, and then the second year. My children are quite, they're only 13 months apart. And I think, and I've run a marathon, and I've, wolf runs or triathlons or all of those things. My body doesn't need to recover in the way that my body really had to recover from pregnancy, which I didn't realize, because I did compare it to, you could just have a massage and recover and bounce back. You can't. It doesn't matter how much sleep you give yourself at that point. Firstly, you just can't give yourself sleep. I almost feel that your body I'm sure the mums would relate. I remember wondering how my partner could sleep through anything. Was I now geared to be able to wake up or become a really light sleeper, or indeed not even fall asleep because you're waiting out to hear if your child's going to cry? Even that alone is some form of endurance stroke torture. Frankly, it is tough. And you're right, until you're taken to Hawaii, which who knows how old Mahela's son is, but maybe 25 years into this journey, maybe you get a week off, but it is a long, long, long journey. And frankly, once you're a mother, you're always a mother, and it never, there's never really a time off. So thank you for sharing that, Daniela. Artika, I'm going to have to come to you, and I'm holding myself because I know this is going to be good.
Well, I just have to first say thank you to Danielle as well. I was clapping and cheering you on, because to put that in real terms, to conceptualize the sacrifice, the dedication, the tenacity, the endurance, I think that's something that's just powerful. So thank you for giving us that testament of motherhood, because if I think about my first superhero, of course, is my mother. As a single mother of 3, I don't know how she did it. When folks say, well, how did you become a C-suite leader? How were you able to organize nonprofits, build global movements? My mother was a CEO that managed a budget that never quite worked. She was a CEO that managed everything from baseball to volleyball and everything in between, and still with beauty and grace. So thank you for that reminder. And that's a wonderful salute to the power of creating life, to building character, to teaching values. But my mother came into my office right here. I've been sitting here for almost about 17 months now because of the pandemic. And she came into my office, and it was radically different this time. It was more than just creating life that she always talked about, but protecting life. That she came into my office and she said, after she heard that young man, she was talking about Mr. George Floyd, cry out for his mother. She said, now I know you've been a civil rights attorney for almost 2 decades. I know what your work is, but now I want you to push forward like you never done before. So I would say one of the values that my mother also gave me was about protecting life and bringing forth justice. Did I have the strength to do everything that my pledge to her would require? Absolutely not. That meant that I had to get organized, understand the future of policing, connect with folks from Finland, throughout the continent of Africa, all over the world, to try to figure out what should public safety mean. So I just give that as an example because we also have a protective power innate in us as women and as mothers as well. And so to me, that then goes to a call, an unwavering stance around justice. And that's one of the greatest lessons that I learned from my mother, that when you see an injustice, don't just speak up and speak out, take action, eradicate it at its root and get busy. So without really that, I knew what I needed to do. But when my mother walked in that room and said, you go a step further, I'll never forget it. I was going into a radio interview about the future of criminal justice and a number of different issues. But the reality of it was that the mothers' voices are still leading us today. If we look at the criminal justice reform and looking at policies in America around policing, who is the mother leading us? Valerie Castile, the mother of Philando Castile, that lost her son in such a tragic killing at the hands of a police officer as well. So that protective, that call to action, that's something that only mothers can teach us and lead us on the journey.
Attica, so well said. I'm sure, and it almost takes me to my next question, because now I want to know, we've all probably had those moments. I had that moment many times, but especially this year. I'm Punjabi, Sikh, from India. And although I'm third generation British, when the longest protest in human history was occurring in India, before it even started, my mother called me, and this was last summer, and said, Mandeep, a law has been changed, or actually 3 laws have been passed in India. They are detrimental for farmers. Our whole lineage is a farming lineage. And even though you haven't farmed, or your father hasn't farmed, and your grandfather was the farmer, still, I want you to write about this law, and you're the journalist, talk to the Indian government, sort this out. And I said, Mum, what do you want me to do? And exactly like your mum, she doesn't care what I do. It has to be above and beyond anything that I can imagine right now to make the difference. There is no, I don't think I can, Mum, or it's not reasonable, or I don't have that kind of scope or capacity or impact. It was, you do what you have to do because you know what's right and you know what's just. And she didn't stop until it was in main mass media. She didn't stop until I had an article out in CNN and had made it, so that everybody knew why it was happening and why it then became the longest protest in history, because it was so important. So our mothers often know what's important before even we do. And then you're absolutely right that they push us, and hopefully we will push our children and not take pieces and not hear what's reasonable and not stop until they've made impact too. So Maya, I'm going to have to ask you that question. Firstly, I guess the celebratory question. And then secondly, was there a moment for you? And I'm sure there was, because I already know. And indeed, already I know how you are with your own children. So maybe you could share.
Well, I started early with having children. So my 2 children, I have a son and a daughter. They are 28 and 31. My daughter, I raised them alone, mainly. And I'm now going through the second divorce, but it was not in my plan. But what I learned from my mother, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. So she got birth to 5 children, and she was still a business woman, or used to be, and very strong, but got always the credit to my father, that he felt that he is the big hero. And this is also something sometimes that helps in a relationship. Probably didn't that good. No, I'm kidding. But it makes us strong. And I learned a lot from my mother too, luckily, because she was the lead actually in the company and with the children. And we here in Switzerland have another school system that's probably another part of the world. We do also apprenticeship, We just don't go to gymnasium always. We have this other part. And I can proudly say that my mother educated 64 apprenticeship girls who could make an apprenticeship as a sales girl, and none failed. By side, she raised 5 children and made the bookkeeping and kept the whole company running. So I think this is really a role model for all of us. And I could share a picture with you. We made 2 days ago on the Mother Day with my 2 sisters and the family. And sometimes the men are a little... No, we're just kidding. We are a big family and we are really bounded together and have many, many parties. We're suffering during the pandemic now because we couldn't be together. We are always 20 or more. But it gives us the roots we need also to stand and be stable and spread the love and the strength we have in our community and in our surroundings and with our friends. And everybody, and also our children in the next generation, I can say we have really this empathy and this big heart, and we are here for each other, not just for the family, but for the community, for the friends, for everything. And I think this is also something we have all learned from our mother, that she keeps the family together no matter what. And this is something what I think women are really strong. And this is something I want to give further, and I think I reached that goal already. That's one part.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm in awe of your mother. She sounds like a superwoman, as they all do, and hence Artika's book. It makes me think about when we're talking about the previous generation, like our mothers, we think, wow, we could barely be like them. Like they're made of some different material. And in our own lives, I think we often, maybe this is because of social media, often feel that we're having to, that we only show the good times. But if you're driving change, there will be turbulent times. Success is not linear. And I know that all of you have had to face some real challenges in order to get to where you are too. So I'm wondering whether we could be a little bit vulnerable for our audience, so that the sisters that we're talking to, so that the younger selves that we're talking to, so that the community really benefits from this panel. And only if you feel comfortable, Mihaela, I wanted to ask, is there a time that you could share with us that could actually teach us, or something that you wish your younger self knew, or a time or a challenge that you think we could learn from?
Them, but in the context of what Maya shared, I just recall, of course, sometimes in my life, and they are mainly related to what can I say? I think it's also a part of how us women are brought up to be of service to everyone. And as you mentioned, with forget to put our own mask. So I found myself in pretty disruptive relationships a few times in my life, from which I learned actually, and here I commend Artika for really setting it straight with what she learned from her mother, that actually we have to stand up for ourselves and respect ourselves in the first place. And then everyone and everything around us will fall into place. I used to put others above always, and maybe I can also put it like respect them more than myself. So this is, I think, an important lesson which girls have to learn early. And I'm hoping this sharing will bring some awareness to it. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It reminds me of that, maybe it's a Chinese phrase, I'm not sure, that women are holding up half the sky. I actually think they're holding up much more than half the sky. Thank goodness.
Yes, I'm struggling, a very demanding academic career, single mother with 2 sons. I ended up like that. and then also, putting relationships above and sacrificing a lot and yes, not being respected in return, which maybe it was because of myself and how I was actually setting the stage. So that's what I mean. Learn to set the stage right for yourself and respect yourself.
Beautiful. Respect yourself and almost demand respect. It's okay to ask for respect if you're respecting yourself and you're respecting others too. Something I learned with my sons recently, if they're not speaking respectfully, I will say, well, come back to me when you're going to ask respectfully or when you're going to speak to me respectfully. Because we almost have to set the precedent or say what's acceptable and what's not, because otherwise they'll never know. But you've clearly done a great job, because this Hawaii instance makes me think that they will respect.
One more thing, which I think goes also hand in hand with what Danielle was shared. We are so much, kind of, at least in my personal experience, I was brought up, to be taken for granted. I mean, motherhood and all those, even, pregnancy itself, now how Danielle was emphasizing, yes, it's just taken for granted, and all the work which we do for kids and everything else, just that's normal. That's how it should be. So praising that and learning to praise that is important.
Completely. And having it rewarded properly. I think we're still as a planet trying to figure that out. But again, I think we're going to have to be the ones to figure it out. It's not going to be done for us. Danielle, the mic's over to you.
Certainly. And sorry, just please remind me, what's the question? I was so enthralled with what Mihaela was answering. So
I know. So I was just, there's no need to be vulnerable, but I was asking whether there's a challenging time that perhaps has been, that you can share with us, because success is not linear, and that you think either your younger, well, you're very young, or you're young, but maybe your even younger self might learn from, or that our audience could learn from.
Sure. Let's see. I think that's a really interesting question. I think I think I've learned to give myself a lot of grace. So one of the things I've realized is that things that seem obvious to me are not obvious to other people. And I'm always so far ahead of my time. So I was, drinking green juice and a vegetarian and all of these, like eating organic when I was 12. And so I always kind of lived in these states of like, why does no one else understand this, and feeling different. And then I started to realize as I got older that this was actually a superpower. And once I understood that, then it really reframed how I thought about myself, and it reframed how I thought about my role in the world. Because I realized that I had this gift where I was seeing ahead of other people. And I started to realize that, once I kind of, realized like, oh, I'm a futurist, it all really fell into place. But it was many, many years of feeling, frustration and feeling out of step with others, and not understanding why things that seemed so simple to me were not as simple to others. And it helped me understand that I think because I lived in those spaces for so long where there was a gap between myself and others, I learned to be very gentle in explaining to people, because otherwise you spend all your time fighting. So imagine 12 years old, I'm African and my family is from the Congo. I was born there. So imagine, telling your African family, like, I will not be eating meat. I learned to communicate, right, in ways that were really diplomatic and non-confrontational. And so I think, these things are like, life is really interesting that way, right? Because, now it's something that I wield as a superpower, and something that I use as part of my work, right? And now part of what I do with my work is helping to, create narratives and help companies predict the future, right? So that's one example, but yeah.
So many things have fallen into place, Danielle, as you've spoken. Now I understand what your title of being a futurist actually means. I applaud that superpower reframing or narrative. And the idea of, I've been to the Congo to say to someone I don't eat meat, they'll be like, well, what do you eat? Sorry, we don't have. It's with every meal. And
Absolutely.
I think one thing I really admired about you right from the get-go was how you speak. But now I understand why you speak how you speak. So I found that compared to me, you speak slower, you speak softly, and you speak, you give yourself grace just in the way that you speak. But I hadn't pinpointed it quite like that until you've just explained it now. So thank you for sharing that, because it really helps that we could all give ourselves, I almost speed up, because I think people don't have time to listen to too much, and to give yourself the grace to slow down. And of course, they're going to listen till the end of your sentence. And in fact,
powerful. I just wanted to add to go ahead.
Yes. If you put a pause in, it's even more powerful. So we should all give ourselves that permission. That's really brilliant. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Artika, I'm going to ask you the same, and I'm happy to share the question again, or you can just give us your challenging times, or whatever you'd like to share.
I think for me, I'll have to turn to the advice from my mother again. So out of all the adversities, could you imagine? I was 5 years old, big red glasses, and the pigtails. I wasn't always the cutest kid on the block, nor was I throughout college or throughout most of my adulthood. And then one day I went to the beautician. It was in 2013. And she said, do you trust me? I said, well, it depends. Let's see what you mean. And then all of a sudden I heard, and I was like, no, I don't trust you. But it was too late. Whatever she had done was already done. So I go from long hair to a short pixie cut, because she said, look, you have tried to make your hair curly. You tried to make it and it's grown long, all these different things. I'm giving you just an example. And she said, look, your hair is straight and flat. Cut your hair the direction it grows. And my life has been better ever since. And so here I am, and I know that's a haircut, but I spent 3 decades trying to figure out what was the best hairstyle. And in less than 30 minutes, she told me, look, your hair will never be all the things you're making it. Why don't you go with the natural you? And it was one of the most liberating moments of my life. And it's because of what my mother taught me that I didn't understand until I was in that chair with a master stylist that just said, look, you have short hair. It will grow just the pattern it grows. Forget about the long hair. This even frames your face better. I said, girl, thank you. I got a lot of compliments with shorter hair than I did with long hair. And so here I am. And the reason why I bring it up is because my mother told me, be the best original, be yourself. Be the best original, be yourself. But over years, that's a hair example. I felt the same way when I became an attorney. I said, you have to talk like those famous male attorneys that walk in, and then you have to be like the women in their power, pantsuits. And I hate pants. I only like skirts. So I forced myself to wear a pantsuit every day to court. And I was always awkward before I even gave my opening statement. And so here I am, fast forward to where I sit today in my present time. I can be the best original. I can be myself and say it. Even when I say it to people, they feel that's a little arrogant. When I say I don't have any competition, I don't. My only competition in life is when that final hour comes that I've lived a life poured out and based upon the gifts and talents that I've been given. So I just regret spending so much time with my younger self, trying to be everyone and everything else than just being myself. Just saying it with a little comedy, with a little joy, with a little culture from where I came from. I was like, I can mix a little hip hop. I can mix a little comedy. I can mix it all because that's who I am. That's my culture. That's where I come from. So being comfortable that I can go from a pulpit and do something related to ministry. I can go into a courtroom, a schoolhouse with a kindergartner, wherever I am. And it took me too long to figure out that I had that level of versatility. And I could really be myself. I feel like that haircut that day, I was liberated from all the notions of beauty and who others told me that I could be. I can style my hair in 5 minutes or less, and I love my life.
That is beautiful. I'm never going to look at your haircut. I'm never going to look at any haircut in the same way again, actually. That was just so well put. I need to know how many books you've written.
I've written 4 leadership books, and I've written about, at least 8 or 9 children's books. And I say at least as there's a couple that are waiting for production. So yes, a total of 13 and counting.
Okay, we need that collection. So we'll talk after this, because I just love the storyteller that you are. Thank you. Maya, I will say the question again, because almost I have forgotten what the question is. Oh yeah, it's about challenges. And if you would actually, you've already shared vulnerability, so thank you. And I would ask us to go a little bit deeper. What could we share with our younger self? And it's not what we would share with our daughter necessarily, because I'm not sure our daughters will listen. So just what you'd listen to, what the audience, or you'll be willing to share with the audience who are really listening, and what we've learned from the adversity or the challenges that you faced.
So first of all, thank you very much to all of you. I have learned already a lot. It's really inspiring, all your stories. My younger self, I have to say, okay is still okay. I mean, we have this power always to feel not perfect, and we have so many facets. As we said before, as you said also, I think we want to be a perfect mother, a perfect wife, a perfect businesswoman. We want to be smart. We have to, go to gym every day. We have to take care about our children. We have to be wise. We have to listen to the neighbors. We have to have an open heart and so on. And, it's sometimes difficult. We have our 24 hours of everybody else. And this is the biggest advice, to enjoy the moment more, to live more in the moment, and not, I know I'm not the best example, because I do often the opposite what I say now, but I'm always ahead. I'm not writing now and thinking already ahead or behind or whatever. But this is really the advice I would give to my younger self, not to worry too much. As you said, also to be the best example of yourself, and trust yourself, and go forward. And it will come good when you are with yourself. This is the thing. And all the facets, if I may add this one, I have not mentioned before, I'm also a board member of the Zurich Film Festival. So we have, it's not like the Oscars in Zurich, Switzerland, but anyhow, we have wonderful movies here, and I'm very proud to be there. And this is also a completely other platform. You are nicely dressed, you're with all the famous actors, or you have this documentary movie where you come out of the movie, just makeup is all over, because I have to cry every time. I cannot not do that. So this is another facet. And then I go back and take care about my kids, or work at 6 o'clock, and until midnight you are with your little glass of champagne again. And this is what makes me happy also. And I try to live in the moment, and I stand up in the morning and I'm awake for 20 hours, but I have so much energy because I love it. And this is the thing, you get the energy if you love it, and then you have the passion to do it. So find the passion and go for it is one of my advice to my younger self.
Very well put. So purpose, passion, and being in the present. PPP. Right. My book is actually called The Values Compass, What 101 Countries Teach Us About Purpose, Life, and Leadership. And what you've just said, Maya, is spot on, and really what the book is about. And it takes you through a process that helps you figure out your core values. And it was interesting because all of you in your answers are so clear about what's driving you. So I hope everyone's finding this as inspirational and informative as I am, because you guys have been really just honest. It's just been really refreshing to hear the honesty. I have one final question, and it's funny to ask this with a futurist in the panel, but I'm going to ask all of you because I think all of you already started to share not just what has worked for you so far, but I think as we're emerging out of this pandemic, what you think we need going forward. Or if I put it another way, the reset button has been pressed. We're now creating our lives. We don't necessarily have the handcuffs or the shackles or the framework that was in place. We're emerging and creating something that will really work for us. One thing, Maya, that when you were talking about being perfect, everyone was nodding, like, oh yes, we relate to that, or almost, but that's just the way. Isn't that just the way you are, or isn't that just the way we have to do it? Until you mention the neighbors, and then everyone's like, yeah, I know, we do take it a bit too far. so I'm going to ask Mahela, what do you think we need going forward? Any tips or tricks as we press reset, we create our new future?
Yes, and because you mentioned the pandemic, one huge lesson, and it's not new, obviously, but this has been emphasized over and over again now with the pandemic. How much now, literally, my life depends on you, and vice versa. How interdependent we are. I mean, if I carry the virus, I can be lethal to those around me. So I really must be very aware of my impact on others. This is something, and I don't want to say it's a new awareness, but it's a higher and a heightened awareness right now. So I think this is the lesson which I want taken beyond this pandemic in the world, and which I think will lead to a lot of good. How interdependent we are and how much my actions affect those around me and the nature and all the environment around me. Thank you.
Well put and well said. And I think that's also led to greater empathy, compassion. I mean, right now we're seeing, a campaign of India can't breathe, like needing oxygen concentrators. Every family I know has someone either affected or someone who's passed away or someone who's dying. And previously, I'm not sure we really ever had the empathy we needed. We might have had sympathy when you see death or famine or disease or war in another country, but I'm not sure we ever really unified and thought we can do something about this. But the pandemic has been a moment where you know that tomorrow, actually, that could be your country, or that could have been you yesterday, or that might be you tomorrow. And we have all experienced something quite similar to one another. And I think that has enabled us to really think, you are me, I am you, we are one. So I'm going to help you because tomorrow you're going to help me. Yeah, exactly. Being one another's insurance policy, effectively. So Daniela, I would, as the futurist, I almost feel like you should go last, but since we've been rolling in this circle, I'm going to ask you to go next and tell us what can we expect, or what should we create, or what do you envisage?
Sure. I think Mahela made a really wonderful point about kind of the shift in the world and in our awareness of each other in relation to each other since COVID. And, I have a friend, Ron Guerin, who's an astronaut, and one of the things he talks about is that, COVID is really the first time that as humanity as a collective is experiencing a challenge together. And, up until now, it's, we have these artificial borders and we kind of try to separate ourselves from each other and solve problems on our own. And this is the first time that we haven't been able to do that, right? It's forced everyone to cooperate. And I think that, as we go forward, so many of the other problems that the world is facing are also all collective issues, right? So if you think of things like climate change, And so COVID is kind of the first test of humanity as a collective. But I think it's showing us, right? It's revealing where the gaps are that need to be addressed. And I think all the future challenges going forward will also be collective. And I think so much of what's been revealed has been the lack of support for women, the systemic global lack of support for women. No other group has sustained as much devastation and been set back as much as women collectively. I think if you look at um, a lot of the global programs that have supported new mothers and healthy deliveries, a lot of those programs that had spent the last 20 or 30 years making tremendous gains in developing countries, in helping to improve healthy birth rates. All of those programs, right, have had tremendous setbacks. The first thing to go has been women's care at the point of birth and pregnancy, which, as you all know, is because you're all moms and have been through that, is the most vulnerable, most difficult and physically demanding time in a woman's life. And then you also see it in the workplace, right? So I think in 1 year, women have lost something like 37. I think we've been set back like an additional 37 years in addition to the 150 years it was going to take society to catch up, right? So all those gains of the last 20 or 30 years that women had gained in terms of being established in the workplace, so much of that has been wiped out. So, I look at it and I think there's so many lessons to learn, but I think that the way that we were supporting women wasn't sufficient. And hopefully what we do going forward is to create lasting and real support for mothers and for working women.
So I hope no one else in the panel feels offended when I say that I'm going to ask you, Danielle, as the youngest member on this panel, does this fill you, what you have just shared with us, does it fill you with not fear or dread, but kind of, do you feel like, oh God, this is just a difficult mountain to climb? Or are you hopeful? If you're hopeful, why are you hopeful? And you're going to climb this mountain because the future is a little bit more in your hands than it is in ours, just because you have the advantage of age.
That's a really good question. I think that there's kind of two camps of people that have emerged over, at least that I've seen over the last, I'd say like 10 years, because our society has undergone such, our societies and our cultures have undergone such a rapid transformation. And I think with the digital age playing a shift in how we connect and how we speak. And I think that I'd say that I'm hopeful for two reasons. So the kind of two groups of people I've seen emerge. I think there's a group of people who are looking very critically at the systems we have and deconstructing them. And I think the benefit of that is that they've created a language that's a shared language that we didn't have before. And there's, now I think more compassion and awareness around how we speak about others, having more of an awareness of things like privilege. There's an entire vocabulary, right, that is now a prerequisite for being part of conversation, right? So they've created a community with a shared language. And so I think that's been deeply, deeply valuable. I think the other group of people that have emerged are the people that are the bridge builders to the future. And they're focused on how do we get from where we are to a new system. And I think my energy probably goes more towards that group of people. But I think you need both, right? And I think both are doing really important work. So I'd say that I was hopeful because I think that to me, those are kind of the two groups of people that I see who've kind of rolled up their sleeves and are working to create a better world, even though they're doing it in different ways.
You've given me hope just in sharing that, because when you had left me with the 37 years that we've lost in our progress, I couldn't quite move forward. And now that I think about, you're right, the change in vernacular, my book's just been shortlisted as the Business Book of the Year in the Diversity, Equality and Inclusion category. And I thought,
first of all, congratulations. Congratulations
you
on that. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you. But the fact that there is even a category like that, and the fact that DEI has now become part of, so many people's vocabulary, you're absolutely right, means that I see a shift in how people are acting just because of that. Makes a huge difference. And also, I think so many unified global movements, such as Black Lives Matter or such as Me Too, have also made a huge impact in us having a very vocabulary. And thank goodness for bridge builders like yourself. So I'm very appreciative. Thank you. I know Artika has been applauding, and I'm going to give the microphone to Artika with the same question about the future. What do you see and what do we need?
For the future, it's an opportunity. And when I talked about it in recent interviews and even in my latest book, The Inclusive Leader, I talked about the importance of this being a period to pause, reflect, and grow. And I would say pause. For many of us, it was a forced pause. I would have traveled all over the world over the past year and a half. But with COVID, it was an opportunity to sit here and not be on my next Delta flight. But with pausing, it's also being intentional of what you do with your time and energy. I've been more efficient in this year and a half than I've probably been in 5 years combined, if I'm honest with myself, because it meant that I held myself accountable to that pledge that my mother made me take, that I would do more to protect lives, do more to protect environmental justice, that I would be more intentional on how I was using my time. And reflecting on the past and looking ahead to the future. So for this piece that Danielle has introduced to us, what lessons can we learn from the past? As we take on a new language, how do we also anchor ourselves in a new blueprint, a new roadmap that's never been used before? What we currently have and what we use just won't work. So I'm excited as an educator because my students are thinking about what are the structures that lead to the inequities that we see? How do we reimagine the future by creating new structures, new access to opportunities? And then the growing piece, I think, is always being in a process of learning. So even with COVID-19, I've reached out to my friends all over the world and said, what's working? The first mask that I received was from my friends in China that said, you're not wearing a mask yet? And I was like, why? You know something I don't know? But they shipped them all over the world because they said, you and mother should be wearing a mask. So I felt like we were the first in Minnesota knowing we should wear a mask. But that was the power of friendship. It's the power of Zoom and all the technology and the platforms that are even bringing us together today. If you asked us 2 years ago, we would not have been thinking about the world in this way. So for me, I think the future, when I say it, and it sounds cliche, but the future is bright because we're finally getting an understanding of our shared humanity and common destiny. And there's no way to ignore it now. We've been forced to think about what that means as both an obligation, but also intentionality on how we use our time and energy. So this pausing for me has really been a gift because I was busy being busy. I couldn't necessarily tell you how intentional I was. Yes, there were good and positive outcomes. Please, I cannot ignore that. But pausing, reflecting, and growing requires so much more. And it required me from going to addressing, 20 different issues. Why not try 2? Instead of being everywhere at once, why can't I focus on being mindful and present in one place at a time? And for me, that's the type of innovation that we need, that room of one's own, that space where we can create and grapple with some of the most pressing social justice issues of our time.
So true. And yet, didn't you find that in some ways we created exactly the same busyness, even within this moment of still? Sometimes we were on conference calls with China, like you said, and then Saudi Arabia, and then in fact, I know people who barely have time to go to the bathroom or to eat or to breathe. Things are so packed up against one another, and it's meeting after meeting after meeting. And that then we got to this point of fatigue and burnout. Why we do that to ourselves when we had a moment to really take a break and really cherish exactly what you said, reflect, pause, and be intentional. And yet that was squandered, easily squandered too. So thank you for reminding us. And it's not over yet. So if we haven't had a chance to do that, we've still got a few more months, or a little bit of, it's going to be a up and down path out of this pandemic. So we have time. Thank you for reminding us.
We do. And I just want to give one tip though. We should also be scheduling time called me. I put it on my calendar now. I schedule time literally that says a simple word, think. and so I need that time to think. I need that time for me. I'm from the land of 10,000 lakes. The last year and a half, I finally know where most of the lakes are. I never had time. My house, I'm like, whose house is this? I got familiar with all of my furnace. I haven't been here. So I think making sure that we're creating times, and I ended up launching a space here in our community called Aya's Place, from the Adinkra symbol, that gives us a sense of resiliency and reconciliation and around racial justice issues. So Aya's Place, I designed it to be a place where we can think and reimagine and be those type of futurists that Danielle is just reminding us that we need right now. But I think we have to schedule it in. It's called me, and I put it on the calendar.
I think that's really invaluable advice. I create it through the book, for example. Once you have a book and you take a little bit of time to read it and to do a deep dive, or to give yourself the space and time to reflect, to think, it's a sacred space. And yet how often, even if we're given a book, we don't actually open the cover or read it because we're so used to multitasking or flitting from one thing to another within 20 seconds. On average, we rarely read until we swap the page, either online or on our phone. I love the fact of scheduling deep thinking time. Thank you for that, Artika. And with that, I'm going to go to our final panelist, not final, not last, but you do have the last word, Maya, to share that answer and anything else you might want to say. So the question was future, what you envisage, and what tip or trick you would give to us.
Since we are running out of time, I just want to add what Artika said before. What I have learned during this forced pause time, is I did little meditations like with Deepak Chopra. I think we are more around here who did that. And what I took out is to be more thankful. Because everything was for granted before. We could go out to restaurants, we could meet whoever we wanted. My house was full with people all the time. I went out and so on, And suddenly you are with yourself. And this was a challenge for many person and people. And I think this is one advice I also want to give, to be more thankful for little things, thankful for everything. I mean, we all think we have a fine life, and this is also what makes me positive for the future, especially when I can listen to so wonderful young women like Danielle. This is wonderful, or my own children and the surrounding. And what happens during this pandemic time, people really woke up and have got another mindset, I think. So in that sense, I'm positive as always, and also now and forever.
I feel your positivity, Maya, and believe me, we've never met. I've never met any of these panelists, but Deepak Chopra is the main person on my front cover. So, and yeah, I'm sure you didn't even know that. So we are all connected. We are all one. I can see it very much in this panel. It's been wonderful speaking with you all. Time just flew. And if there's anything else that any of you want to say, please take the stage. I'm just going to pause for a second and let anyone say anything they might want. And if not, with that, I would say a huge thank you to Amplifying Her Voice, to Anu, and to the Mother's Day Summit for bringing us all together, for creating such a variety of sessions over these last few days. If you haven't been listening to these sessions, they're incredible. They're very honest and refreshing, and this has been no different. So thank you for giving your heart, your soul, your mind, for sharing so much, ladies. And I look forward to creating many more sessions and much more invaluable advice with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful moderation, for getting the best of us.
It was really wonderful. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
you. Such a pleasure to meet all of you. And Mandeep, absolutely echo what Maya said. Thank you for just making us all feel so welcome and shepherding this conversation so beautifully.
Well, I'm humbled and touched, and Danielle, I think we all want a piece of this future that you've created for us. So onwards and upwards we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the best to everybody. Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. I think we just press the leave button unless you want to go into another session, which I'm sure you do, or network or expo. Hop in is a whole new world.